Hey Summoners, make sure that you've subscribed to the Mobalytics YouTube channel and hit that bell button. That way you're always up to date and part of our notification squad. Hey Summoners, it's your challenger coach Adam Moriarty Isles with our newest Mobalytics tier list video for patch 9.12. So let's get started. If you're wondering where Mordekaiser or Ryze are on our list, we have a rule that we don't place new champions on our list initially, but in my opinion, Mord looks pretty cool and fun to play, so try him out. As for Ryze, it's like what? Version 7 for him or something like that, and I'm pretty sure he's going to get another rework next year, so I'm not sure what to think about this current iteration. Starting off for the top lane patch notes, we have nerfs to Aatrox. He will no longer gain extra healing from external sources when he uses his ultimate, and his passive auto CD was significantly increased early, but slightly lowered late game. This nerf is going to hurt his laning phase, both in terms of sustain and trading, so that he's less of a bully early on. While the nerf to his ult is pretty much to stop Yuumi Aatrox from going 2v8 in competitive play. Overall, it really shouldn't hurt his ranking too badly. Up next, we better nerf Aurelia and her ECD/range. This is meant to hurt her early lane kill potential and snowball reliability, but overall, she's lucky Morello isn't on the balance team anymore. Otherwise, he probably would have removed her stun altogether. Tahm Kench only received a nerf to his W lockout time, range, and it received a damage adjustment as well. This wasn't the level of nerfs that needed to happen to bench the Kench, not even close. TK top players were spared by Riot for some reason, but not by me. He's the first champion put in my notepad for the counter to the tier list video this week, so stay tuned. As for the top lane list itself, we have Nasus, Garen, Urgot, Yorick Mori, and Tahm Kench remaining in S tier. In A tier though, we have some movement with Illaoi dropping to B tier due to her doing so poorly versus range matchups like Neeko, Cannon, really anyone who isn't melee, she's just going to lose. On the other hand, unfortunately Riven has made it back to A tier from B tier. Though her last set of nerfs hurt her really badly on release, Riven players were able to adapt over time to the E-nerfs by playing more aggressively, relying more on trades with her Q, and not by her shield saving her from every bad trade. This new playstyle is still performing worse than her pre-nerf state, but Riven's win rate is still rising patch by patch, so we'll see if she makes it back to S tier. Even Viper from FlyQuest was confident enough to pull her out in her nerf state versus TSM. Despite the fact that TSM may have been playing poorly enough for him to win with Yuumi top, my point still stands, Riven is on the rise. Shifting down to B tier, we have new additions in Gnar, who has become more popular with his Grasp of the Undying playstyle, as well as Pyke, Rengar, Fiora, and Gangplank, who were all added in since we decided to expand our B tier. Irelia though, went to the graveyard of C tier to join the long-standing resident Ryze, as they are both good champions, but they require you to kind of one-trick them and have good mechanics. Moving on over to top High-ELO S tier, we have Irelia, Aatrox, and new addition Riven. She rises to S tier after the fall of Akali to A tier and Sylas, who got hit by a bunch of changes that I'll go over more in depth during the mid lane patch notes section. This left a gap where two very strong laners were hurt enough to allow Riven with her new aggro playstyle and offensive-oriented builds to find success even after the nerf to her shield, which kinda sucks because I think a lot of us like seeing less Riven. Moving down to A tier, we have new additions Renekton, Rumble, Kennen, and Neeko. To no real surprise to be honest, as they all happen to be champions who auto-win lane phase, and are seeing a decent amount of play in competitive. While in B tier, we added Olaf, Rengar, and Gnar due to the increased popularity as counterpicks to certain meta champs like TK or Renekton. Illaoi and Kayle though were sent to the graveyard because they're terrible at laning phase versus the current high-elo meta. For the jungle patch notes, we have a buff to the Zac attack, with increased damage on his W to help with clear speed, as well as a change to his ult which actually drops blobs, but pushes people back less. These are good changes for him, as his clear speed needed help, and the extra survivability from the blobs is a huge deal for him. Not only that, but the reduced knockback on his ult actually helps him stick onto his targets easier. Despite these amazing changes, it's not actually going to help him that much and will probably only land him in B tier. Moving to the jungle list itself, we have returning S tier members Vi, Amumu, Volibear, and Nunu. Jungle A tier solidified itself after our last patch update, but I would like to highlight one champion, and that's Elise as my recommendation for the patch. Elise is a champion who has strong early ganks, invade potential, the best early diver, and her own CC, so when her first time Lux support misses bind, it will be okay because she can lock someone down herself. Elise excels at snowballing and early pressure, so if you're confident in your mechanics, look to pick her up. Then we have new additions to B tier with Fiddlesticks, Skarner, and Zac. You probably noticed Skarner being picked recently in competitive a lot, and it's because of his quick farm speed, easy pickoff potential because even pros like Demonte forget to buy QSS against him, and he's a strong counter to people who think they have godly mechanics, aka everyone who uses Godfist Lee Sin. No joke, every time I see that skin, it's an off-roll 80 carry main using it while they put out less vision control but more deaths than a Scuttle Crab. As for Zac, he was added due to his buffs, and Fiddlesticks was added because at least once a game, people forget what he does or where he is, and he just gets a multi-kill with his ult. For the High-ELO Jungle list, we have a lot of changes, with Kha'Zix falling out of S tier in favor of Sejuani joining Nunu and Rengar. This happened mostly because of how impactful Sejuani's CC and engage can be at the highest level, while Kha'Zix moved down to A+, as his low pressure early game can be outscaled by the current S tier roster. In A tier though, we have Taliyah making a big comeback, with many high rated junglers like Tarzan, Cuz, and Tarzan picking her up again, but one of those junglers plays her way worse than the others. Let me know in the comment section which one you think it is. Now we also got Broloff making his way back into the meta, smashing his way straight to A tier. This happened thanks to an LPL build where people finally learned that bruiser junglers should stop going tank if the late game is almost always going to be bad for him. They might as well stop building Cinderhulk, go warrior into cleaver, and all in on that early mid game. This allows him to dominate the early game even harder in the hopes that he doesn't have to become useless. Moving to B tier additions, we have Warwick and Gragas due to the buffs, and I'd like to apologize to Gragas for my harsh words about him last week, as the numbers were enough to help him make it to B tier, and even potentially A tier, so I'm sorry, Fat Man. We also sent Udyr, Zac, Rammus, Amumu, Graze, Master Yi, and Aatrox to the graveyard because quite frankly, they suck past Diamond right now. For the mid lane tier list, we have Lux, Morgana, Vel'Koz, Ahri, my pick of the patch Pyke, and the notorious Malzahar holding it down in S tier. Pyke mid was talked about a lot on our last patch update as a counter to Lux, but also, he's overall the strongest assassin pick on the normal list. His laning phase is just far too safe, he has 2 forms of escapes, and I personally think the numbers on his passive regen are just way too high, as you can't even poke him out of lane. Itemization wise, you want to start with a Tiamat into full lethality, Duskblade, Ghostblade, then Edge of Night, along with some Moby Boots for easy roams. Keystone wise, most people take Electrocute with Precision Secondary for Presence of Mind and Legend Tenacity. But the best part about playing Pyke mid is normally assassins get flamed for chaosing, right? But Pyke, you get to flame other people for not letting you chaos with your ultimate. It's kinda like being a Draven main, but without all the screaming. Our next pick of the patch is from Peckinwolf with Nico in A tier. He recommends Nico with Glacial Augment, GLP, and Spooky Ghosts. I think I've heard this before. He says try taking TP mid, then back to get a second Doran's early, then use it to get back to lane. In terms of playstyle, he says to play for picks around your team using the slowing items while looking for flanks to start fights with your TP, then your ultimate. For runes, go Magical Footwear, Biscuits, and 5% CDR, and in secondary take Domination for Taste of Blood and Ultimate Hunter or Ingenious Hunter depending on your preference. For B tier changes, we have Katarina moving to A tier with new additions to B tier Brand because laning is strong, Swain because most people die to his ult 1v2, TF because his Triforce build is better than his AP build most of the time, Heimer because he's mid lane Teemo, and finally Aatrox because despite his nerfs, he's still really good. Swapping to our High-ELO mid lane list, we have Talent and Akali remaining in S tier despite her nerfs, as she is still able to snowball early off killing squishy mid lane champions. To some people's surprise, we also included Rumble to S tier mid lane for solo queue, because currently he is able to win almost all matchups with his insane priority and roam potential. Many pro mid laners are even spamming him in solo queue, such as Bjergsen, to practice him as he is the strongest up and coming sleeper pick from mid lane, so try him out while he's hot. For A tier changes, Aatrox is coming in even despite his nerfs because he should have been A+ last patch, with Ahri falling down from S tier to join him, mostly because she was overvalued in the past. We also have Pyke coming into A tier due to his increased priority as a solo laner. In B tier though, we have the legendary Articuno, also known as Anivia, making it into the list. Even Froggen has been playing her in LCS recently, and with the spellbook setup, she's been performing better in solo queue. Patch notes wise, bot lane does have some small changes, with Ashe W going down by 1 second at all ranks, which is a minor buff. We also have a buff to Caitlyn's base AD by 2, which is once again minor, but still pretty helpful. Shooting over to the bot lane tier list itself, we have Jinx, Misfortune, Sivir, and Ashe in S tier, with my recommendation of the patch being Jinx. She is at the moment by far the best AD carry at Diamond or below, and only really competing with Sivir. Jinx is perfect for capitalizing on opponents' mistakes due to her reset mechanic on her passive, while also scaling into a monster on 3+ items. If you're currently wanting some free low from bot lane, I highly recommend you pick up Jinx. Now, you'll notice that the list itself didn't change at all this patch. That's because bot lane is mostly played by one class of champion, Marksman. Because of this, there is no real reason to play anything but the top 4 champions, or else you end up handicapping yourself because the pool of marksmen to choose from is too small to produce enough counters to really contest the most optimal picks. In my opinion, Perks was right when he said that mid laners were better overall at the game compared to bot lane mains, because by now, bot laners should have learned that they need to expand their pool of champions they pick from if they want to win more. Just sticking on marksman isn't going to work, and I'll defend that opinion in the comment section as well. Just like in the normal list, the High-ELO list does not have any changes, so Jinx, Sivir, Ezreal, Kai'Sa, and Draven remain in S tier. One champion I would like to talk about though is Xayah, as recently many people have seen her priority in LCS be very high and might be wondering why she is not S tier. It's because she's S tier with Rakan, but only A+ without him. Knowing this, many teams attempt to draft Lover's lane. For example, one team might pick Xayah only to have Rakan taken away or banned. Or they might pick Rakan only to have Xayah picked away, thus making her priority actually be higher than her champion strength. I'll also finish off this section by asking ADC mains to be more like Viper, or Perks, or the man who surpassed Uzi but just on Heimer, Hjarnan, or even double lift on Vlad. Please look to experiment or expand your champion pools past just the marksman class. It's a joke at this point if you think a carry role is allowed to get away with having such a small pool of champions to pick from. League has evolved now, and most bot lane carries have to stop trying to relive Season 2. Lastly, like always, we have support. For patch note changes, we have a nice buff to Karma with her new Darkstar skin coming out, along with an increase to her slow and her Q, as well as both her E mana cost and its movement speed duration getting a buff. Must be some kind of coincidence that these changes were on the same patch along with other enchanter changes. Speaking of enchanters, Lulu got a bunch of cosmetic changes and a shield buff. Yuumi also received some changes intended to help her at lower levels of play, but nerf her at higher levels. This includes massive base HP increase, but now CC will interrupt her W ability. As for the W change overall, it's weaker on burst spellcasters like Eve, but slightly better on ADCs in terms of the different ratios. And the last patch update for the video will be Nautilus with a nerf to his Q damage, which is gonna hurt his early game all in. Now with that out of the way, in the S tier for the support tier list, we have Sona, Nautilus, Nami, Lux, and Hewitt's pick of the patch, Janna. He says that simply put, her buffs last patch were massive. She traded early game power for incredible late game scaling, which is great in lower elos since games tend to drag on longer. The buff to her shield requires her to be a little bit smarter about using her CC correctly, but it's not difficult. Her build is simple and her play pattern is pretty easy. If you're an enchanter player, you should have an easy time climbing between Janna, Sona, and Nami. Moving on to A tier, we have Pyke, who is gaining traction as a counter to the heavy enchanter meta we're seeing right now. Mostly because enchanters, or maybe enchanter players themselves, seem to have trouble dodging his hooks, or dealing with his all-in potential. as for B tier, we moved Tahm Kench to the graveyard as he's better suited for top lane and solo queue. For S tier High-ELO support, we have Sona, Janna, Thresh, Rakan, and Will's pick of the patch, Yuumi. One of Yuumi's biggest threats in lane was Nautilus due to the sheer strength and lockdown potential he had. While he did receive a nerf to his early game damage output, Yuumi and every other utility-based support will have an easier time against him in lane. While he still has his CC, his ability to one-shot squishy champions has been reduced. Yuumi is his pick of the patch again because of her sheer strength and ability to consistently poke in lane. Her lockdown and poke potential is insane once you get a few levels on her, and her lane dominance can almost be as potent as Xerath's. For A tier changes, we had Nautilus fall down due to his nerfs. Even though they were minor, the S tier champs are monstrous scalers right now, besides Thresh, so if he can't snowball in lane versus them, he will struggle to close out games. And in B tier, we added Karma due to her buff/skin combo. Oh, and also both TK and Galio were sent to the graveyard due to Riot nerfing them out of solo queue viability thanks to competitive, which is a shame because I feel like this happens way too often lately. Thanks again for watching our tier list video for patch 9.12. Feel free to ask us any questions in the comment section below for us to answer in the next Q&A. And as always, be sure to check out mobalytics.gg.